The Lechering Diary of Professor John Mcbean by George Donald Mcbean Chapter 2.
Chapter 1 finished by showing the Mambo song. In other words, John's students in the Philippines and Thailand were his Mambo girls. The streets in Bangkok were full of young girl students begging for tuition. Of course, in Norway, students had to pay fees or have a state grant in order to pay for the professor's salary. However, in Thailand, they had revolutionized the whole idea of education. It was the professor that had to remunerate the students. John's students in Thailand and the Philippines were little interested in mental activities, such as the study of English literature, and wanted to be taught in the secrets of their physical existence. In this context, it was uncertain who was teaching who, because it seems Professor John learned more from his students than they learned from him. But to cut to the chase, John had planned mentoring activities for a number of students.
Professor John's teaching plan. One of the reasons Professor John was in the red in debt was because he was suffering from a double malady, yellow fever, and young girl fever, nymphet fever. In a futile attempt to cure himself of yellow fever, he thought he had to instruct as many yellow girls as possible. This is not true. He didn't want to be cured, but wallowed in his sickness like a hog, wallowing in its own dirt and filth. While sipping on yet another cognac 2 or 3 jours into the flight, he noted down the names of the girls he had instructed in the past, while the Mambo song was spinning around his head.
Professor John's Mambo students: 1. Kimmy 2, Girly 3, Lynn 4, Nadine 5, Jane 6, Mel 7, Rihanna 8, Sabrina 9, Divine 10, Jovi 11, Nan 12, Kimberly, Josie's cousin, 13, Ploy, Fern 14, AOM. In retrospect, 14 students was perhaps an ideal number for a class of students. John started to compose his own personal Mambo song in his head, but couldn't get all the names to rhyme, so he stopped halfway. Mambo song: a little bit of Sabrina in my life, a little bit of Kimberly by my side, a little bit of Rihanna is all I need, a little bit of girly is what I see. John introduces himself. The reader who hasn't read the previous epistles about John perhaps needs an introduction. John imagines himself to be a libertine, but this seems to me to be an exaggeration. Whatever, I will allow John to introduce himself. John, I am Professor John Mcbean. This is a true story, an account of my travels, teachings and research. I include a sketch of myself here, which was done by a street artist on Sukhumvit Road, Bangkok.
One, two, three, four, five. Everybody in the car, so come on, let's ride to the liquor store around the corner. The boys say they want some gin and juice, but I really don't wanna be a buzz like I had last week. I must stay because talk is cheap. I like Angela, Pamela, Sandra, and Rita. And as I continue, you know they're getting sweeter. So what can I do? I really bag you, my lord. To me, flirting is just like a sport. Anything pump it. A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side, a little bit of Rita's all I need, a little bit of Tina's what I see, a little bit of Sandra in the sun, a little bit of Mary all night long, a little bit of Jessica, here I am, a little bit of you makes me your man. Mambo number 5. Jump up and down and move it all around. Shake your hand to the sound.
Any adept teacher should be able to create anticipation. In other words, students are not interested in only short study notes, but want more extended intercourse. Perhaps it is the same with storytelling. You don't want to reveal everything all at once. I'm no professional writer of detective stories, like Agatha Christie, but at least by dividing the novel into chapters, I might be able to create some suspense. Such as how adept were the girl students in their studies? What grades did they receive, and so on? Did they achieve fulfillment, and utter yelps of delight, or not?
When I first met John, I remember when we first met in November 2015, I wearing a skirt and sandals, and I'm with my friend Whiskey. She is very petite and sexy. I chatting you in an educational website before you come in Philippines. The day you comes and finally we have time to meet each other. You're inviting me for dinner in Malate, and yes, I agree. I come to that place that you said. You look tall and slim. You are nice to me and to my friend Whiskey. We're starting to talk while sitting in the restaurant Friday's Robinson Place in Pedro Hill, waiting for our orders. It's our first time, so I feel nervous that time. After we eat, you inviting us to walk for a while. She continued telling by their first encounter. The time goes and finally we're planning to go to your room for instruction. Walk on the long street to your hotel, New World Hotel. We take the elevator straight to the 27th floor. The large glass windows on the 27th floor show the city spread out before us. We really didn't want to eat the view, but only walked down the corridor and stood by the door, waiting long time while you mess up with the key card and opened the door for us to walk in. You had no sooner closed the door than we turned onto you and asked, you want to instruct both of us together or separately? We started to prepare for your instruction. You suggested that before
After Professor John had treated us to a soothing Buddhist massage, we felt a deep sense of satisfaction, gratitude, and even a little bit of enlightenment. It was as though the stress of the world had melted away, leaving only peace behind. But then, I couldn't help but notice how tired Professor John looked. His eyes were heavy, and his shoulders sagged from the weight of his studies and research. I glanced over at Whiskey, who shared the same concern, and we both knew what had to be done. I turned to Professor John and said, "Sir, you've given us such a wonderful experience. Now it's the students' turn to return the favor. Whiskey and I are both qualified masseuses, after all. How about we help you unwind?" Professor John gave a tired but appreciative nod, and I commanded him, "Lie on your back, sir, and lie still." With a knowing smile, Whiskey and I began to work our magic. Using our cat-like clawed fingers with incision, we commanded the professor to turn over. His head was buried into the pillow. Slowly, we moved our hands over his back, shoulders, and buttocks. Massaging his thighs, easing away the tension that had built up from long hours of work. We told him to turn over again, and we noticed that he had begun to stir. Our fingers danced over his shaft, applying just the right amount of pressure to help him release the stress that had been holding him captive. We 2 girl students worked on every part of the professor's body, not least his phallic member, using our 20 dainty little cat-like fingers, clawing at his erect priapus. Our fingers danced over the head of his member like fairy feet, applying just the right amount of pressure to help him release in a long and prolonged diffusion that had been holding him captive. When we had fully relaxed and satisfied him, I asked, "My mother also needs to receive carnal knowledge. She is old, but she is open to being penetrated by new instruction. She loves to swallow new seeds of understanding. And her fingers are adept at praying to the god Priapus. Can she come?" You agreed. So we later formed a colloquy of 4, and our dialogue and intercourse reached ever new heights of enlightenment and satisfaction. Sabrina's friend Whiskey was eager to join the tutoring session. Originally, the plan was for Sabrina to receive one-on-one instruction. But it wasn't unusual for Asian girl students to bring along a friend to help in the tutoring session. This was something they had done before, being instructed and disciplined in tandem. Both were in their mid-20s. They had a decade of experience working as a student team in this way, as they had been seeking out extra instruction since the age of 15 and before. They were what you might say, old pros, although only in their mid-20s. When they were younger, around 13, 14 and 15, and still going to school, they often sought out instructors in their spare time, learning many new tricks from a variety of carnal instructors. They particularly enjoyed being disciplined if they failed tests, and liked to be spanked on their bare buttocks for failing to please the teacher. This increased their carnal knowledge enormously, and the instructors would often regret the pain they had inflicted on the girls, and give them compensation in the form of a small gift in order to salve the bloody marks branded on their bottoms. The instructors would often pay them a small sum when they carried out small handy jobs. They didn't pay much, but they earned enough to buy some fried chicken at Jollibee, makeup, and money to load their phones. Now that they had graduated, they continued their carnal education under 5-star professors in 5-star hotels, such as Professor John, who not only showed them the way to satisfaction, but also reimbursed them for their troubles. So now they could afford to buy iPhones and other such luxuries. This commitment to continuous education was a shared passion for both of them. Despite the fact that Professor John realized they had set the agenda beforehand regarding them receiving instruction in tandem, he paid it no mind, and let them carry out their complete educational act, which they had performed before on hundreds of other occasions to the delight of many lecturers. Sabrina and Whiskey both looked forward to failing their exam, because Professor John had explained that he would have to catechize them with his fleshy and sharp cane, which he would insert in their hindquarters as punishment for being inattentive students. But that they had to sign a paper first to agree to this part of their education, as was now demanded by the law of the land, and that they would also receive compensation and medical treatment if needed.